Welcome back to the Change the Culture podcast, educating on the importance of empowerment, self-defense. I'm Annie Orenstein, your host of the Change the Culture podcast at My Power and producer of My Power Casts. My Power is a social tech startup dedicated to reducing and preventing interpersonal violence through technology, education, and community. The My Power app is currently in its beta phase, available now for download on iOS and Android. This incredible app is soon to be in the hands of millions of people worldwide. On today's show, we have Sheila Watson. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much. Sheila is a martial artist with a 4th degree black belt, primarily in Taekwon-Do, and an empowerment self-defense instructor over 20 years. She is the team lead program developer for the Association of ESD Professionals, instrumental in creating and developing an international credentialing program for the ESD instructors and adjacent professionals through the association. The owner and head instructor of Iron Fan Martial Arts and Empowerment, Sheila has created and led programs in Canada where every girl graduates high school having taken empowerment self-defense. She is also a fiction writer, happily married with 4 adult children, and is a dog lover. On today's Change the Culture episode, we are going to speak about Sheila's personal story as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, domestic violence, and workplace harassment. We'll also be speaking about Iron Fan Martial Arts and Empowerment and the Association of ESD Professionals credentialing program, as well as teaching empowerment self-defense to individuals with disabilities. So let's get started. Thank you again, Sheila. I know you're sitting in Canada.
I am.
As empowerment self-defense ESD is around the world. Tell us about yourself and your journey to discovering empowerment self-defense.
Well, first of all, I never thought I would be here. It never in my life, when I was younger, would I have thought that this would be a source of passion for me, and changing the world, changing the culture would be one of my pathways or journeys. I got started through martial arts because I had a child who wanted to be a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. And so he insisted that he needed to be taken to a martial arts class. So I got started in Taekwondo when the instructor, in a not cool way, speaking of journeys through self-defense, bullied me into taking the class, guilted me into taking the class. Well, you're a bad role model as a mother to let your children take Taekwondo when you just sit here and do nothing. You should be on the floor with them. Which is a really terrible take, but it worked. And he was, ironically enough, spent a lot of time in those classes doing self-defense. Self-defense was one of that particular instructor's passions about martial arts. But it was a very masculine, this is such a typical story too. It was a very masculine idea of self-defense. Mm-hmm. And like many people, I thought, there's got to be a better way. And that's when I discovered empowerment self-defense.
Wow. So, but you going back, I mean, did it answer questions? Did it open up your eyes into how you overcame what you went through growing up?
It's difficult to share these stories. It's also important to share these stories. Trigger warning, sexual child things coming up. So one of my stories that happened in childhood was a male babysitter that we had who was attempting to have sexual contact with us. And I was 7 years old. My baby sisters were even younger.
It's horrible.
It is. And all I can tell you is that in that moment, the first time that this babysitter attempted to do this, I somehow, at 7 years old, don't ask me how, I don't know, knew enough to say, no, you are going to stop now. And if you don't, I'm going to tell my parents.
Wow.
And here I am at that age, 7 years old, and I knew to do it. And he stopped. He stopped.
Wow.
That was powerful. That was a powerful moment for me. And of course, I didn't think about this until years later and about the effect that it had on me to be able to say no that young, that clearly,
Mm.
And I meant it and have it work.
Do you remember having conversations with your parents? And did you feel traumatized afterwards, or did you feel empowered that you
Empowered?
Well,
I felt absolutely empowered after. This was very different from what other people might experience, right? But for me, that was a powerful moment where I said no, and the situation, the danger went away just for me saying no,
wow.
and that I was going to tell. So I didn't feel traumatized by that at all. And I didn't even think about it much growing up. And I never spoke a word of it to my parents for 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was that like, the
We
conversation that
never
you
had
had
that
with them?
babysitter again. We never had that babysitter again, by the way. We did tell, and that was something else that was extremely powerful in that moment. My mother came home and we said, we don't want that babysitter ever again. And she believed us. She didn't
Wow.
ask why. She didn't delve into it. She knew that we meant it. We were really serious. And so we never had that babysitter again. It was that simple.
That's so amazing, because she trusted your instincts and you had a voice in that moment. I have 3 children. Sometimes when I want to get a babysitter, so I ask the kids, who should we get? Hopefully
Right.
that they're not charging too much for the hour. But when I ask them, who do you want to come? And of course I want the babysitter that's also going to wash the dishes, but I want the babysitter that the kids can trust themselves as well, that
Yes.
they are like, oh, they're like, see you, have a good time. And that gives them a sense of empowerment as well. So that's amazing that they're
And
not
that's how the culture changes. That's how we are different parents than our parents were.
right.
Right. Because
Right.
now knowing this stuff, knowing what we know about um, children's instincts, we can
Mhm,
give them some of that
mhm.
power.
Well, and for 30 years you didn't share with your parents. So that's
Nope.
really also also so interesting. So
Yes.
as a young girl, you used your no, you used your get back. I don't want this. And that's truly inspiring. But yet, as is life, we're always, as we grow up, we experience other things, and you have more to your story, which also makes an impact in terms of what you do and your why. So maybe you can share a little bit more about other things that you experienced that contributed to why you do what you do now.
Right. You don't know what you don't know. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important to teach our youth to know and recognize these things. So I didn't know that I was in a
Mhm.
abusive relationship until I knew. I was aware that I was unhappy. I was aware that I wasn't feeling good about myself. I was aware that my personality and my behavior had changed, but I had no reason to understand what was causing it
Mhm.
until I started learning about empowerment self defense. And we should not do things in that order. We should, when we're young, learn what empowerment feels like
Mhm.
so that when that power starts getting eroded from our reality, that we recognize it. As I said, I didn't know I was in an abusive relationship,
Mhm.
but I was, and um, and I got out of it, and uh, it was terrifying, but necessary, and so I did it.
Absolutely.
Right.
What would be your turning point where you knew that that was the moment that you needed to out?
Oh, very, very, very clear. And again, my turning point is in when I'm able to speak again. So my ex-husband's favorite way of making sure that I stayed in line and did what he wanted me to do was to threaten to leave. That was his go-to.
Mhm.
That was the one thing that no matter what was happening, as soon as he threatened to leave, I would do whatever he asked me to do because it was
Mhm.
the idea of him leaving terrified me, and
Mhm.
for good reason. So he left one night and he said, I'm going to stay away for a couple of days and decide whether I want to stay married to you or not, or whether I want to divorce you. And he was using it as a threat. So understand that. This is not a man who was truly going away to think about his future. He was using it as a threat. He came back an hour later. And this is when that was my moment of change. That was my turning point. I'm like, no, 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 no. I am not allowing you to do this anymore. I recognize it now as a manipulation tool, and I'm not having any more of it. I'll tell you what, I'll save you the trouble. I'm divorcing you. And I told him that right then and there. And that was it. Once I said it out loud, it was a done deal as far as I was concerned.
Wow. When we become challenged and we find ourselves in different lows, it's finding that moment of superhuman strength to say, no, 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 I'm in control here also. I have a, but that's what I'm hearing from your story. And incredible. So, wow.
Well, and that's
So
when it got hard, because that's when they were no longer empty threats intended to manipulate me. It was in that moment when once he knew that I was leaving him, then they were real threats. And that's when it got really terrifying. But it was too late by then, because I had already said it. Once I said it out loud, I had manifested it somehow in my own head.
It was something that you packed with yourself, a decision that you came to that was like, no turning back. Wow.
Yeah.
So you get to empowerment, self-defense. And does it heal you at a certain point? Does it also give you that strength to teach others to step up in those times when they need to?
Healing comes in all kinds of different ways over time. And I don't know that I can say that empowerment, self-defense specifically was the access to healing. I mean, I think the real access to me for healing was meeting my now husband. And he was such a different man, and so kind and gentle and nurturing and loving. And he got me through that. All the ugliness. And just to know and really feel loved. That's what the healing really came from. But empowerment, self-defense. But empowerment, self-defense. Again, I want to reverse the order on things. I don't want my children, anyone's children, to learn about abuse by being abused. I want them to learn about abuse before it happens. And that's where my passion comes from. That's what, and maybe you could call that a different kind of healing. But for me, it's important for people to be able to see it and not live it, because they've seen it and they know that they can walk away from it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because whatever we go through in our lives, if I can try to reflect back to your beautiful story, and I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing what you're sharing. I know it's not easy. There's I see a sense of relief that things are now how they should be.
Yes.
And it's an experience of fixing. It fixes what was derailed in a sense. And that gives also our children the opportunity to see the real relationship. I understand that you just had an anniversary as well. So that's, an incredible celebration.
Yes, our wedding anniversary. We've been together
Amazing.
16 years now, but we've only been married for 8. Our kids made us get married because they wanted us to be married. And so we did.
Amazing. Amazing. So a beautiful, beautiful story. And we should always see that light at the end of the tunnel. And what I also hear you talking about is the importance of preventative measures. And the passion is in the prevention piece, that we don't want anybody to experience the pain that we go through in different scenarios. However, whatever cards are dealt to us, we want to say, no, we want to say to our children, don't accept every card. Let's say, put up your hand and say, no, that's not going to be dealt to me. I know what that is. That's not something that I want in my life.
Yes.
And to teach them the red flags, and to teach them how to assess situations that are questionable and how to respond to them and how to set boundaries and to use the 5 principles of think, yell, run, fight, and tell, we're preventing violence. And that's really the core. You're right. You're absolutely right. It's not about the after. We don't want to specifically talk about the healing. We want to talk about the prevention. It's beautiful. And I thank you so much for that point. And so you started Iron Fan Martial Arts and Empowerment. So how did that when was that started? I know that during COVID, things took a turn, but maybe you could share with us.
Sure. So I left the martial arts school that I had been with for more than 10 years because the head instructor was sexually harassing me. And as I found out later, several other black belts in the school. And I stood up for myself and I said, it's not okay. And you need to stop immediately. He didn't stop. So I walked away from that, and I still love my martial arts, and I still love Taekwondo, and I still wanted to do it, and I still love doing my empowerment self-defense classes. So I started my own school, and I don't know that I meant to do that because I started the school in January of 2020, I believe, and then COVID hit, and I haven't been able to. I'm just starting to get back into running that school again. It was ill-timed, let's put it that way. Unfortunately,
everyone's encouraged to pivot when you had the excitement and you were ready to go.
Yes,
with your passion projects, and
it was something I couldn't pivot on. Or not well, and that's okay. I am much more comfortable teaching and learning in person than I am over Zoom. And of course, I'm better at it now because it's 3 years later and we're all better at this whole Zoom thing now than we used to be. So I'll get it started again. I have a couple classes at the end of this month that I'm teaching back at my high schools, and that always makes me excited. I absolutely love teaching high schools students. It's my favorite group to teach because they have that same urgency that I do. They come to me constantly saying, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, well, let's talk about it and let's figure out what to do. And at the end of my classes, that's the most frequent thing I hear. I didn't know what to do, and now I do. And I'm like, that's how I want you to be when you go out into the world, when you become an adult and you start facing these things in your daily life. That's how I want you to feel. You know what to do.
Right.
And if you don't know what to do, you know who to talk to. Right? That's what I want.
Wow. And this becomes ESD becomes second nature in a sense. So you've helped ESD get into high schools, and that these girls shouldn't graduate without ESD experience. It's a tool for life. It's like learning how to walk. Once somebody understands empowerment self-defense, they have tools for life, and it's always there at their disposal to use. And all these different situations where people that are dealing with harassment in the workplace know how to hold others accountable for their actions and how they can step up and speak their voice when it's time. So thank you, Sheila, for sharing about your story as well. And I wish you luck on this, on the continuation of your journey, because I'm sure that you have a lot to share and a lot to teach. And I bless you to get to all these girls and women and to give them those tools for preventing violence. And you're also the team lead program developer for the Association of ESD Professionals, which has an incredible credentialing program, which you're a big part of. I had the pleasure to have on the show Samantha Waterman and others, and share with us the progress.
We have people in our world right now who have a certificate in empowerment self-defense, a professional designation that they can very, very proudly say that they wrote an extremely thorough, robust, challenging exam. and came out the other side. And they have the certification now that gives some oomph to speak when they go to speak to people about their programs and their ESD and what they're bringing. That they can say that they have an international certification and it's working. People are listening. The government organizations, the non-government organizations, schools. When you come in with this professional certification, it's meaningful to people, and it will really help. And I'm very, very, very proud of the work that I've done for the credentialing program with my wonderful team from all over the world who helped me develop the exam, the questions, the program, who help with the rating of the exams.
Amazing.
And I think it's a good thing. I think we've done good.
It's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing because, first of all, up until now, individuals that are so passionate about empowerment, self-defense, and pushing violence prevention out into the world has been a battle that everyone's doing on their own. It's a lonely battle. And now this, not only does the credentialing take everything more seriously and takes things to the next level, the investment that the professional does to take this test and to learn, and you're creating an ecosystem around the world where people could really lean on one another, a collective and a force, a force to be reckoned with.
I think so. And I think ESD has really grown in the last 5 years. I think that this feeling that those of us who've been doing it for a long time are sitting in our tiny little corners of the world, in our local area, doing the thing that we're doing. And there have been there are ways of getting together and discussing. It's not like they didn't exist before, but it's very different now, 5 years later, like in the last 5 years. Now, when people are becoming empowerment self-defense instructors, they have the community with them right away. Right? They don't have to go seeking the community. They learn together. They have discussions. They develop friendships. And they have this incredible resource, like you said, ecosystem, this incredible resource of each other that we can tap into whenever we need energy or healing or ideas or anything else that we need. It's all right there. And it's a force that is going to change the world. It is.
It's beautiful. It is. It's making an impact around the world. And that's what draws me to it personally. I only got involved recently, but every person that I meet around the world that's on the front lines of ESD, it's each and every one of you are so inspiring. Whether it's Tasha in Hawaii, I mean, we have incredible Toby in Costa Rica, Toby Israel, Lisa Gay that we had on recently from California from Impact Personal Safety. And it's amazing and it's global and the initiative is universal. And it's really getting out there. And obviously was one of the reasons also we took it a step further with My Power and because of COVID and the app, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. I also wanted to ask you, Sheila, about your experience with teaching ESD to individuals with disabilities. And I had this question, I don't know if it's the right way to ask it, but what is it like to teach the 5 principles to individuals that are not able to use one or more of the tools of think, yell, run, fight, and tell?
That's such a large question when it's put that way. So first of all, I think that everybody can use all of the 5 principles. We don't have to think of those 5 principles as being narrow or in a small box, right? Large box. So there may be somebody who is not physically capable of physically hitting somebody else. But fight encompasses so much more than just the physical aspect of hitting another human being. So fight also means finding an advocate who's going to help you be your voice, speak up for you, who's going to not allow you to be, to not allow your voice to be heard or whatever, like those kinds of things. So there's no such thing as somebody who can't use those skills. We can all use those skills. Now, in terms of teaching people with disabilities, I think everybody, just so everybody knows, I am hearing impaired, so I have a disability. I also have non-typical brain function in some ways. And I also have an eating disorder. So I have some things that make life more complicated for me. Everybody who is an ESD instructor is already teaching somebody with disabilities. Because not all disabilities are obvious and not everybody likes to share them.
Right.
I personally have found it very empowering recently to be more open and more able to share what my disabilities are. I have personally found that to be useful in my life and making it just a little bit easier, but not everybody feels the same way. So you, in all likelihood, if you're teaching ESD, you are teaching people with disabilities. You just may not know it. Right?
It's so important. I mean, also to find other advocates. We are our own advocate. And then there are situations where we need to have somebody else advocate for us, especially like in law and things like that. People stand up for us and for our voice when it's hard to express that. But even going further, besides for disabilities, we have situations where we touched upon domestic violence situations and such, where women, we're told, run. We want to say, as you know, in the 5 principles, we want to say, use your tool of run, go, leave, done. And it's not so easy to do that. It's complicated. And how do we help people navigate those situations when to find the right time, when to find the right moment to speak up, to set the boundary, when to find the right time to leave a situation?
The underlying principle beneath the 5 principles is that it's your choice. It's your decision. And when talking specifically about abuse, what the abuser does is take away your power, ultimately. And the entire point of empowerment self-defense is to give the power back to the person who's in that situation. So as an advocate or as an ESD instructor or as a friend, your role in discussing somebody who might be in an abusive relationship, your role is to make sure that they have the power, that it is sitting all in their hands. What do you feel like? What are you afraid of? What would you like to see happen? What do you want your world to look like a year from now or 5 years from now or a decade from now? And our job is just to is to make them be aware of their own needs and wants and power again. I mean, and it's not easy. It doesn't come easily at all because you're so used to somebody else taking that from you. It becomes your normal way of living day to day. And so to have somebody say, well, no, wait a minute. What do you want? It's very confusing when you've been in a long-term abusive relationship. It's very difficult to suddenly say, well, I don't know what I want. Well, let's explore that a little bit more then, right? Those kinds of things.
Absolutely. And another thing that comes to mind, I know we have a few more minutes, that I just wanted to delve into with you is that sometimes we have like this fight or flight instinct, which is just to get out of a situation. And we might jump over this ability to set the boundaries and fall into patterns that we're enabling certain things to happen because we haven't yet set a boundary. We haven't cut it off and said, oh, wait, I'm not okay with that. Actually, this happens more. Did this happen? Did that really happen? And then it's like, oh, it happened again, but I didn't say anything. Oh, this is becoming a pattern. And then before we know it, it's just a given. And before we know it, it's like, oh, I didn't even set any type of boundary. No. And then, we don't want to like say, okay, go take the keys and go. We want to encourage in the right order is what's going on here. set that boundary first, you know,
Right.
and see how, because some things can be fixed, right? Some things can be helped with,
Oh,
especially
absolutely.
with this. Yeah. I wanted to ask you about what you felt about the launch of our Veda app. So what's your take on it?
It's an incredible app. Going back to the disabilities a little bit, I think one
Yeah,
of the
sure.
things about the app that is really important is that it feels like something that is for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't take, it takes courage, especially when you have a disability, to go out in the world and to take a self-defense class. And you wonder if you can do it. And you wonder if you're strong enough. You wonder if you're smart enough. You wonder if you're going to be able to do this. Now, we all know how fantastic it is, but those are the concerns that people have before they may take a class. And what I love about the app is that I don't feel constrained by that. You know, you're opening an app on the phone. You do this a million times a day. It's easy. There's no pressure. There's no worry. And you can, it's so much about the personal choice. You can do it on your own time, in your own space,
Right.
as
Absolutely.
often as you want or as infrequently as you want. And it still has all of the fun and the energy of in-person classes. And it's a game changer in the world, I think.
Yeah. It's definitely a game changer. We're very grateful. It's a lot of hard work, and we're getting into the hands and into schools, onto college campuses. And it's definitely such a growth. To expand and to scale it up is huge, because it's definitely needed. Is there anything, Sheila, anything else that you'd like to share with our Change the Culture podcast listeners, and how can people get in touch with you?
I'd like to say a little bit more about the disabilities and teaching people with disabilities. So they're already there in your class. You may not be aware of it. There's, like many things in ESD, there's different layers to it. So the first layer is to make sure that your classes feel welcoming and feel inclusive. In your marketing, your advertising, your conversations with people about it, make sure that you're aware of things like closed captioning on your videos and make that available. Make sure that you do descriptive text for images, that sort of thing. So that's like the first layer. The second layer is when you have people with known disabilities in your classroom, to work with them and come together. And this should be, in my opinion, give and take, right? So don't ask them to do all the work, but talk to them enough that you know what they need and what they're looking for. Often they are, at this point, I'm very clear with my hearing impairment, what I need whenever I walk into a room. I know that I need to be standing in a certain position. I know what to ask of people, but not everybody has that. So talk to them, make sure that you're working with them that way. And then the third layer that I think is also really important is a disability is never just a disability. A disability affects the way that we move and socialize with others in the world. And I have all kinds of really interesting stories about how my hearing impairment, if people don't know I'm hearing impaired, just think I'm weird, because I don't socialize in the same way that other people do, because I can't understand what you're saying. And so then we want to make sure that we add that piece into our ESD practice. How does your disability affect the way you are in the world, and what would make it look better to you? What would make it feel better to you? And then find out what that solution is, and then incorporate that into your teaching for that individual, so that that individual, as much as possible, can be empowered with their disability.
It makes a lot of sense. It's leveling it out. It's normalizing that we're all find ourselves on some type of spectrum of what we can do, and even things that intimidate us, and anxieties that we have, and fears that we have, can affect our empowerment, can affect our choices, and bringing that to the table and saying it out loud and sharing it with the class, it's putting the vulnerabilities on the table it's very empowering. It could wipe away a lot of uncomfortableness with others. And it's just putting it out there and saying, hey, this is what I got, and this is what helps me. And, I'm rolling with it. So you should too,
Yeah.
And that's wonderful.
Absolutely. And it's owning who you are and in all the full glory and messiness that is. And
Beautiful.
Sometimes some wonderful things come out of it. So I'm teaching in Prague in 2022. And all of the new instructors that I am teaching, they all know I have a hearing impairment. And we all have opening circles, right? So, and the opening circle, I'd only ever seen it done, or closing circles as well. I've only ever seen it done in one way. The instructor stands in a place in the circle, and we go around the circle and people talk. And there was one day where I was teaching and I was struggling so much to hear what everybody was saying that I didn't feel like I was participating in the circle because I was just missing what everyone was saying. And so what I did is I said, everybody always does a circle this way, but I want to try something different. And so I went and stood next to the person who was speaking so I could hear them clearly and I could really participate in what they wanted to share with the circle. And I stood right next to them. And when they finished speaking, I went behind them and I moved over to the next person and I stood right next to them so I could hear them. It was such a powerful moment for me, but also for them because they felt so connected and so supported in that moment that someone had come across the circle and was just standing right next to them, listening to them. The power of listening is so underrated sometimes in our society. And especially for me as a storyteller, I speak a lot, but that powerful moment of just standing right next to them, listening and hearing every word they said, that's not something I experience very often. And it was a beautiful moment. And I was really proud to be in that room.
That was a beautiful win-win situation.
Yes.
Where you were helping yourself and, you were saying what you're saying is important. It's like writing down what somebody's saying in a sense. It's like grasping at their words and saying that they're valued, because it takes a lot of courage to speak up and to share and to be vulnerable. So you're saying, I want to hear that. I want to learn from you. I want to understand you more. And that affords the empowerment that gives such a beautiful thing. So again, Sheila Watson, thank you so much for being on the show. I learned so much and I look forward to having you on again. It's so incredible, such a privilege of mine to meet people from around the world, again, on the front lines of ESD, empowerment, self-defense. And I bless you that you continue doing the hard work that you're doing and all the credentialing and all the students that you're giving them tools for life. And again, congratulations on your anniversary.
Thank you.
How could people reach out?
You can get a hold of me. I don't know, any way you want. Social media, Facebook. My email address is watson@esdprofessionals.org.
Wonderful. No, perfect. Thank you so much again. Thank you to our listeners and our guest, Sheila Watson. We would love to hear from our listeners of the Change the Culture podcast. So pop over to the Change the Culture Facebook group and share your thoughts, questions, and success stories with us. And you can catch up on the last season of Change the Culture by visiting our website, mypwr.co.il/podcast, or check us out on Spotify, YouTube, and Alexa. I love saying that. And Alexa. And we want you to be part of the conversation and part of the solution. So stay tuned for the next Change the Culture podcast, where we will hear from more professionals in the field of ESD around the world. Thank you also to Alicia Halevi, the editor, and to Nikki from The Power of XYZ for making this podcast happen, as well as to My Power for the opportunity. All the best, Sheila. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a wonderful time talking to you. So,
thank you. My pleasure.